by an ethnobotanist, a chemist, and a scholar in the 1978 book, The Road to Eleusis, is that the mysteries involved a ritual drink called kykeon, a mixture of water, mint, and barley, and that the barley may have been infected with ergot, a fungus that grows on grain and produces compounds very closely related to LSD.
Interesting.
So in other words, they may have had a psychedelic experience, a chemically induced encounter with death and rebirth, a trip to the underworld and back, which would explain visions, transformation, the lifelong inability to speak about what was seen, absolute conviction that they had truly been somewhere and experienced something beyond the ordinary.
Oh my gosh, I'm imagining Sophocles like, dude, that was wild, man.
Welcome to this episode of the You Two Scare Me podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Andy.
And I'm Felice, and we are coming to you from Key West, Florida. In case you're just joining us for the first time, we are two silly, spooky girls who love ghosts and anything weird or unexplained.
We know we don't know anything or really understand what's happening with any of this stuff, but we still love it.
We also have a deep respect for the unknown and unseen forces at work around us. During our episodes, we like to laugh to keep it light as we work our way through the haunting tales.
We hope to bring you stories that make you question and give you a chill. But a quick warning before we begin. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Our tales are drawn from folklore, history, and reported experiences, but we don't claim them as fact. Some stories may include sensitive topics, so listener discretion is advised.
Absolutely. Dive into the shadows with us as we bring you haunting tales in this episode of the You Two Scare Me podcast.
Shall we dive in? There is a moment, a single, precise, measurable moment that happens every year in late March. It lasts a fraction of a second. You can't feel it. You can't see it. But for thousands of years, people built stone monuments to mark it. They slaughtered animals for it. They danced until their feet bled for it. They named their children after the goddess who ruled it. It's the vernal equinox.
Ooh.
The moment when the sun crosses the celestial equator, when day and night are held in perfect balance, and then the light tips the scale and begins to win. We call it the first day of spring. We put it in our phone calendars between dentist appointments, grocery runs, and the million kids' activities. And then we scroll past it. But for most of human history, the vernal equinox wasn't just a calendar notification. It was a matter of survival. It was the line between life and death, between another month of frozen ground and empty food stores, not the grocery store, Felice.
I use HelloFresh.
But it was between the stored food and chutes pushing up through the mud. People who lived close to the land, which for most of human history meant everyone, tracked the sky that way that we track our phones, obsessively, anxiously, because the sky told them everything. It told them when to plant, when to move the herds, when to expect the flood, and when to expect the thaw. And when that balance point arrived every spring, when the sun rose exactly due east and set exactly due west, when the shadows fell just so, it wasn't a coincidence to them. It wasn't the movement of the earth. It was a goddess. Several goddesses, actually. And tonight, that's who we're talking about. We're talking about the goddesses of spring, the rituals built in their honor, the fires lit, the seeds buried, the blood offered, and the doors thrown open.
Oh my gosh.
And maybe most surprisingly, the way these ancient practices are still alive, still breathing, still happening right now in your neighborhood, in your kitchen, in the eggs you dye every April without quite knowing why. Spring is not as soft as it looks, and these goddesses are not as gentle as the flowers they're named for. Let's go back in time a bit. We're going to start in Anglo-Saxon England, roughly 7th or 8th century CE. The old gods are losing ground and Christianity is moving in. Christianity is renaming things, repurposing festivals, and building churches on top of sacred groves. There's a monk named Bede, full name Venerable Bede, which is an incredible name.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's writing a treatise called The Reckoning of Time. It's a work about calendars and about how to calculate the proper date of Easter. Dry stuff, you might think. But buried inside is one small passage that has fascinated historians and pagans for over 1,000 years. Bede writes that the Anglo-Saxons called the month of April Eostre Monath, Eostra's month. And that this month was named for a goddess called Eostre, in whose honor feasts were held at the time of the spring equinox. That's almost everything we have. One monk, one paragraph, one goddess. And yet that name has echoed through history in a way that is genuinely staggering when you think about it. What's Eostre sound like?
Easter.
Thank you. The most widely celebrated Christian holiday in the Western world is named after a Germanic spring goddess.
Wow.
A goddess we have almost no direct records of. A goddess whose worship was considered pagan superstition by the very monk that recorded her name. But she outlasted him. Now, Bede doesn't give us much. Some scholars have even questioned whether Eostre was a widely worshipped deity or a more localized figure that Bede stumbled upon. Jacob Grimm, yeah, one of those Grimms,
Okay.
wrote about her extensively in the 19th century and helped cement her as a major figure in Germanic paganism. But some of what Grimm wrote was scholarly reconstruction rather than documented history, and so some of it got blurred together over time. What we can say with more confidence is this. The root of her name, Eostre, means east, the direction of the rising sun.
Okay.
And that same root word shows up in Sanskrit as Ushas, the Vedic goddess of dawn, in Greek as Eos, in Roman as Aurora. All of them trace back to the same meaning word, to shine, to burn.
Ooh.
What this tells us is the concept of Eostre represents a feminine force of light and dawn and renewal arriving from the east with the returning sun. It's not just a quirk of Anglo-Saxon religion. It's one of the oldest ideas in human history. Cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years kept arriving at the same image, a goddess made of morning light. Now, let's talk about the Easter Bunny. I know. Stay with me. Okay. The hare was sacred to Eostre. Hares are crepuscular animals. I learned a new word.
Nice job.
Do you know that word?
I've heard it before.
Oh my
but
gosh,
yeah.
I never knew it.
Yeah.
Okay. It means most active at dawn and dusk.
Oh, okay.
So that connects them symbolically to the goddess. They were potent symbols of fertility for obvious reasons, and the moon because lunar cycles govern reproduction. In some traditions, people claimed that they would see the shape of the hare in the full moon. So that's probably folk legend. They're a little bit more medieval than ancient, but still, there's a tale that says Eostre found a wounded bird dying in the snow. Out of compassion, she transformed it into a hare so it could survive the cold. But the hare retained its former nature and would lay eggs once a year in the spring, decorating them and offering them to children as gifts from the goddess.
That's crazy.
So a bird became a hare that lays eggs. The
Yes.
Easter Bunny is not from Hallmark. It
Wow.
is the ghost of a goddess.
That's so interesting.
I know,
Wow.
right?
Yeah. I love, I think it's so interesting to hear about the history of, some of these traditions. And it doesn't undermine what's happening, like what it transformed into. That's,
Right.
There's nothing, in my mind, there's nothing negative about how anyone celebrates, how they celebrate based on where they are in history or whatever,
Right,
and when
yeah.
whatever happened. But I just think it's so fascinating to go back and learn that, those origins.
Right.
That's
I know.
cool.
It's so interesting. And then you'll hear a lot more in this episode, but it's about, different places, different time periods, and how everybody is recognizing the arrival of spring with traditions that are still happening in some way, shape, or form today.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting.
And also it helps, it really makes sense in my mind to understand why, the Christian, whoever was saying, okay, now we're going to use this or, this symbol or whatever, we're going to call it Easter. You use what you know,
Right.
so it makes
Yeah.
sense to whatever message you're trying to give to other people in whatever way. You want to make it something that they can understand.
Absolutely.
So to me, I don't know, it makes a lot of sense.
Right. And I think
that's
too,
interesting.
when Christianity was spreading or other practices were spreading, right? It's always hard to give up. You're not going to just cold stop what you've been doing for all of these years or what
Right.
your family's been doing, right? Your traditions. And so
Yeah.
you adopt new ones, you adapt the ones you already have, and then they
Sure.
all kind of, evolve.
Evolve, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
That is really fascinating.
Some later Norse and Germanic traditions connect Eostre and the spring festivals to sacrifice.
Dun, dun, dun.
So it's understood that the earth's renewal has a cost. Seeds literally have to rot in the ground before they can sprout, and the frozen earth has to be broken open. Spring doesn't arrive gently. It arrives through violence that includes ice cracking, rivers flooding, and predators emerging from months of scarcity. They say that blood returned to the earth so the earth would return something to you. In some versions of Eostra's mythology, her sacred hare eventually became her enemy, and she cast it into the sky in fury. It became the constellation Lepus, the hare, positioned perpetually beneath Orion. So the cute spring bunny was frozen in the stars as punishment.
Ooh.
So even the Easter bunny has a dark ending, apparently. Oh my gosh, that reminds me. Have you ever watched American Gods?
No.
Okay, there's a whole spring montage, and Kristen Chenoweth is Eostre.
Oh, okay.
And there's bunnies everywhere and eggs and lots of pastels and some really dark undertones.
Ooh.
You should watch
I'll
it.
have to check it out.
It's a really cool show. So now we're going to head south to ancient Greece to meet the goddess who's perhaps the most famous deity in Western mythology. Though spring goddess doesn't cover exactly what she is. Her name is Persephone. She's also called the maiden or Praxidike, which means she who exacts justice.
Uh-oh.
She's also called, by some who really want to be clear about what they're dealing with, Dread Persephone.
Oh.
This is the goddess that people have said was a kidnapping victim for centuries. Let me remind you of how the myth goes.
Okay.
So
Refresh my memory.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
In case you haven't brushed up on your Greek mythology, Persephone is the young, beautiful daughter of Zeus and Demeter. Oh boy. Persephone is young and beautiful. She's the daughter of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, and Zeus. She's picking flowers in the meadow of Nysa. And Hades, the god of the dead, opens the earth beneath her feet and takes her into the underworld.
Oh, man.
Demeter searches for her daughter. For 9 days, she wanders around without eating or drinking, holding torches, asking everyone she meets if they've seen her child. Nobody answers. Finally, Hecate tells her what happened, and Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, stops. She withdraws. She refuses to let anything grow. The crops fail, animals stop reproducing, and famine spreads across the earth. No gods are receiving offerings because there's nothing left to offer. So Zeus, who is, self-interested here, he eventually intervenes. He sends Hermes to negotiate Persephone's return. Hades agrees to release her. But before she leaves the underworld, she eats pomegranate seeds, between 3 and 12, depending on which version you read.
Okay.
And because she's eaten the food of the dead, she cannot fully leave. She must return to the underworld for part of every year.
Oh.
When she's below, Demeter mourns and winter comes. When she returns, her mother's joy makes the earth bloom. That's the myth that most people know. It's beautiful, but some say it's missing something crucial. Did she eat the seeds by accident? Or was she tricked? Or did she eat them on purpose?
Ooh, maybe she kind of liked it down there.
Right? Because here's what the myth doesn't say. But if you look closely, by the time Persephone returns to the underworld, she's not the same girl who was just picking flowers on the surface. She's a queen. She rules the realm of the dead with authority. The dead approach her with reverence and terror. She decides their fates. When a water nymph catches Hades' eye, Persephone destroys her. She tramples Minth, the water nymph, into the earth until she becomes the mint plant. So, Persephone is not a rescued victim. This is a woman who found power in the dark.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, it seems like
She got
these
a
seeds
little
were her
taste
choice.
of power.
Yeah. So it's like Persephone is part of both worlds. And that's what makes her the goddess of spring, because spring is part of both worlds. It's the return of warmth and the memory of the cold. It's life insisting on itself, even out of death. It's not innocent. It's been underground. So let's move on. Let's talk about the Eleusinian mysteries.
Okay.
So if you want to understand how seriously the Greeks took Persephone and spring and death and the promise of what comes after, you have to know about these mysteries. So arguably, they were the most important religious rites in the ancient world. They were celebrated for almost 2,000 years. So from roughly 1500 BC until 392 CE, when the Christian emperor when the Christian emperor Theodosius had the sanctuary destroyed. So that was 2,000 years.
Wow.
The mysteries were held at Eleusis, a small town about 14 miles from Athens. Every year in the autumn, which marks Persephone's descent to the underworld, initiates would gather in Athens, fast, ritually purify themselves in the sea, and walk the sacred way to Eleusis. So it was a big procession.
Okay.
That took a full day. There was singing, there were rituals, there were sacred objects carried in baskets that no uninitiated person was permitted to see.
Oh.
At Eleusis, and I'm sorry if I said that wrong, in the inner sanctum called the Telesterion, something happened. We don't know exactly what. The initiates swore absolute secrecy, and remarkably, they largely kept it for 2,000 years. But what we have are fragments and hints. The accounts of people who were transformed by the experience. And could only describe it in the vaguest, most awestruck terms. Cicero, have you heard of him? Mm-hmm. The great Roman orator, who wasn't given to enthusiasm, said the mysteries gave him, quote, not only a reason to live in joy, but a reason to die with better hope.
Oh.
Pindar wrote that initiates alone know, quote, the end of life, and know, quote, its beginning given by Zeus. Sophocles wrote that those who participated in the mysteries were thrice blessed because they alone knew what awaits after death. So what happened in the room? Well, we don't know. But
no idea.
The leading theory that was put out by an ethnobotanist, a chemist, and a scholar in the 1978 book, The Road to Eleusis, is that the mysteries involved a ritual drink called kykeon, a mixture of water, mint, and barley, and that the barley may have been infected with ergot, a fungus that grows on grain and produces compounds very closely related to LSD.
Interesting.
So in other words, they may have had a psychedelic experience, a chemically induced encounter with death and rebirth, a trip to the underworld and back, which would explain visions, transformation, the lifelong inability to speak about what was seen, the absolute conviction that they had truly been somewhere and experienced something beyond the ordinary.
Oh my gosh. I'm imagining Sophocles like, dude, that was wild, man.
Cicero's like, oh my gosh, that was so freaking cool.
That was so trippy.
Wow, man. But, this made me think of what we were just talking about the other day.
About DMT.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, in case you don't know.
Yeah.
Tell them.
So DMT is a substance. What does it come from? We talked about it before.
I can't remember what it comes from, but it's related to LSD, right? Like it's like on that, isn't it? Like this? Okay. Yeah.
Here we go. DMT drug. Yeah. So DMT is a psychedelic compound that comes from a plant, and it's present in ayahuasca, and we also produce it in tiny, tiny amounts in our brain. I actually think it's related to melatonin in some way, but it's supposedly the people that do this, well, a lot of people do it to help with addictions and to help with PTSD and other kinds of trauma. I think it actually rewires your brain. Like it breaks certain connections and then rewires them.
It's also,
that's the idea, I think.
Well, and ayahuasca is part of a lot of religious ceremonies for certain groups of people.
Exactly, yeah. But supposedly the people that are doing these DMT therapy sessions or whatever they all experience the same beings and the same experiences when they get there. I don't know how much of that is the power of suggestion or actually like something on a different plane or what.
Right, like they're accessing something that we can't see or
I mean, if it makes sense, like if if we're only using a certain portion of our brain and then this thing opens your brain up, then maybe you are just like physically able to finally see things that most people can't see.
Right. Who knows?
I don't know. But I'm just imagining like Sophocles and these guys out here having this like trippy experience. It's crazy.
Right. And who knows, maybe they were experiencing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of like everybody who drank the kykeon experienced Persephone's descent or wherever they descended to. And then when they came back, spring.
Ooh, that would be amazing.
Right? But Greece isn't even the beginning of the story. It's not even close. To find the beginning, or at least as close as written records go, we have to go all the way back to Mesopotamia.
Wow.
To the world's first cities, to a civilization called Sumer, flourishing in what is now southern Iraq around 3500 BCE. So that's a lot of years ago. So that's 5,500 years ago.
That's amazing.
The Sumerians gave us writing, they gave us the wheel, they gave us the first recorded legal codes, the first recorded love poems, the first recorded jokes.
Oh my gosh.
I want to read them. And they gave us Inanna. Inanna is the Sumerian goddess of love, beauty, war, justice, and political power. She's not a gentle deity. She's vast and fierce and contradictory and magnificent. And she has a descent myth that predates Persephone by over 1,000 years. But with one difference. Inanna doesn't get taken. She goes of her own will. So there's some opaque suggestions about, why does she go? Is it ambition, curiosity? Is it a desire to extend her power? But for whatever reason, Inanna chooses to descend into the great below, the underworld, that was ruled by her sister Erishkigal. She tells her servant Ninchubar, if I'm not back in 3 days, get help.
SOS.
Right? That's kind of like what we do before, like we go like on ghost investigations. Yeah. If I don't come back, come look for it. Yeah. And so she descends into the underworld. Now, in their tale, there's 7 gates between the world above and the world below. At each gate, a gatekeeper demands that Inanna remove something, an article of clothing, a piece of jewelry, a divine symbol of power, her crown, her lapis lazuli necklace, her rod, her royal robe, her sandals. At each gate, she protests. At each gate, the gatekeeper says the same thing. The ways of the underworld are not The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. So by the time she reaches her sister, Inanna is naked. All her power, her beauty, her divine authority is gone. Ereshkigal looks at her sister, the shining goddess of the upper world, in just flesh, and then she kills her. She strikes her dead and she hangs her body on a hook.
Oh, gross.
And above, in the world of the living, everything stops. The animals stop mating, the fields stop yielding, the rivers slow, because Inanna, the force of desire, of growth, of abundance, is dead. So 3 days pass. Ninshubur, the servant, goes and gets help.
He's like, we're going in.
So she goes to the gods, and the god Enki creates 2 small beings from dirt under his fingernail and sends them to the underworld with food and water of life. They sprinkle it on Inanna's corpse, and she rises. But the law of the underworld is absolute. The land of the dead must be paid. No one leaves without sending someone back.
Man.
So Inanna goes to the surface with a whole bunch of demons following her to decide who will take her place. She goes home to find her husband, Dumuzi, sitting on his throne. He's not mourning. He's just hanging out, ruling, chilling. And so she looks at him. She looks at the demons and she points.
She's
Take him.
Easy choice.
And so, they drag her husband into the underworld while Inanna watches.
Ooh.
So spring arrives because the goddess descended, died, and returned. But her return costs a life. Dumuzu's sister, Geshtinana, and I'm sorry if that was wrong, out of love for her brother, negotiates a compromise. She and Dumuzi will each spend half of the year below, 6 months each. And so the seasons turn, not from a mother's grief like in the Greek myth, but from an ancient debt, a sacrifice made and eternally renewed. So this myth was written on clay tablets and survived 5,000 years of wars and floods and empires.
That's amazing.
It's the oldest story of its kind that we have. The theme is the same though. Life descends, life dies, life returns, but at a cost.
Yeah.
The earth, no.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, how interesting that there were 7 levels or whatever. And it was the same with Dante's Inferno. He had 7 levels of hell.
Oh my gosh, I got to chill.
Yeah. And I kind of doubt that Dante was reading these.
Sumerian tablets.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, let me get these clay tablets out.
You know? Isn't that interesting?
Yes. Have you seen, there's another, oh God, it's another, internet thing that's circulating, but it's about somebody who supposedly died and then came back and did a sketch, and it has all of these layers.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There's
There's
something
weird
to it.
stuff happening.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Yikes.
Oh.
I kind of, I don't mind that she sent her husband.
He's just hanging out. Can you imagine? She comes back.
He's
She's like, I've been through it. And he's just like,
she's like, I was hanging on a hook and you're just eating grapes and getting fanned with a palm leaf. You're a jerk.
yeah, see you later.
Yeah.
Take him.
Take him. See ya. Your sister can share it with you. That's fine. Whatever.
Oh, man.
You guys work that out.
Yeah, good luck. See ya. Okay. All right. So we've been way back in time, but now I want to bring it back to the current. Because sometimes I feel like when we talk about ancient history, it feels like you're in a museum, right? Like it's so far away. It's fascinating, but it's not
Doesn't
really
really apply.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not right here. But let's think about Easter. Most people who celebrate Easter, even Christians, observe traditions that are directly descended from Eostre's spring festivals. The eggs, the rabbits, the timing itself is calculated to align with the full moon after the spring equinox, the same astronomical moment that pagan spring rites had always marked. So the church absorbed the festival rather than abolish it.
Right.
A lot of people do spring cleaning. The ritual clearing of the home at the turn of the season, throwing open the windows, sweeping out the old, making space, is found in cultures across the world.
Yeah.
Jewish Passover involves a thorough cleaning of the home to remove all leavened bread. Persian Nowruz, the spring new year, involves Kain Takani, literally means shaking the house.
Ooh.
Iranian families clean every surface, every corner before the equinox arrives. In China, homes are swept before the new year to clear out bad luck. So the details differ, but the impulse is the same. Something in us knows that the turning of the season is a threshold.
Yeah.
And thresholds should be crossed cleanly. Consider the food, like hot cross buns. Typically eaten on Good Friday, they are almost certainly descended from small cakes that were offered to Eostre or other goddesses at the equinox. So the cross on top that we think of as a symbol of Christianity predates Christianity and could represent the cross quarter divisions of the year, the 4 seasons.
Oh, interesting.
We eat them because our ancestors ate them. The recipes changed. The reason may have changed. The season didn't. And consider what modern pagans and Wiccans do at Eostre, the spring equinox Sabbath. They plant seeds literally or symbolically and speak intentions over them. They decorate eggs. They leave offerings outside like spring water, flowers, a candle lit at sunrise. They observe the moment of balance and they celebrate the returning light. What they're doing is not so different from what humans have done on this day for thousands of years. The forms shift, but the impulse is ancient and recognizable. And even for people who practice nothing, who identify with no religion, think about what you do in the spring. Maybe you open your windows for the first time in months and you stand there with cold air coming in. Maybe you plant something. Maybe you do a big clean, throw things out, rearrange furniture. Maybe you just go outside and turn your face up to the sun to feel it, to feel something. That feeling, that specific wordless physical thing that happens in your chest that warms you, that first warm day of spring has been felt by every human who's ever lived. The women in Sumer watching the river begin to run clear again. Anglo-Saxon farmers seeing the first green shoots. The Greek initiate walking the sacred way to Eleusis with a torch. They all felt it. And they named it. They gave it a face and a story and a ritual. They built their whole year around the moment when light tipped the scale and began to win. We still feel it. We just forgot most of the names. But the goddesses don't need us to remember them to keep doing their work. Eostre doesn't need us to know her name to make the dawn come earlier every morning. Persephone doesn't need our prayers to ascend from the dark and make the flowers push up through the cold ground. Spring comes anyway. That's the thing about forces older than civilization. They don't wait for your participation. But there's something that happens when you show up, when you pay attention. When you stand outside at sunrise on the equinox and let yourself feel the full weight of the moment, you know that this has been happening for 4.5 billion years, and you get to be alive for one small piece of it. The mythologies were never really about the goddesses. They were about the feeling of standing in the first warm sun after a long winter. So go do it.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh, I love that. I think it's, another thing that I think is so interesting is how the structures that we have on Earth, like the ancient structures, like the different pyramids and all kinds of, and Stonehenge and all of these different things that are all over the world are aligned with these seasons. Like I just saw one, I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in Latin America. I didn't take notice of like what it was, but it's a pyramid, and the way that it is shaped when the sun hits it on that equinox, it looks like a fiery snake.
Yes.
It's going up or I guess it's down the pyramid with its mouth open. And I'm like, wow, like what kind of planning had to take place?
It's amazing.
Aliens.
It's amazing.
But really, like, imagine how long it took to build that, but also how do they even figure that out? That's so amazing.
I think I was thinking of that too when I was reading all of the things about the equinox. And like you mentioned, there's so many ancient structures that, and it's a lot to do with the light. So that one is an incredible one, but also there's a thing about Stonehenge. There's several of the ancient pyramids that there's something that you can see at just that time, at the perfect time of the equinox.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow, how incredible.
Yeah. How did you make that happen?
But
it's amazing.
I love though this feeling, and it's a little bit different for us living here because it is warm all the time. But
we're like, oh, it's the first cool day of spring. Thank God.
But when you are living in a place where winter seems so long,
oh yeah, it's brutal.
That changing of the seasons, it does give you hope.
Yeah,
and it gives you warmth. Like you just feel differently.
Yeah, it's invigorating for sure.
And I love the idea that everybody has experienced that feeling. When you put your face up to the sun, or you appreciate the beauty of a flower.
Yeah.
Or new food growing or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just an incredible feeling. And I think, we can all maybe take a few extra minutes to stop and appreciate those small things.
Those small changes. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. That was so cool. I love that. Okay. Are you ready for Somebody Told Me?
I'm so ready.
We're switching gears a little bit. So as you know, I went to Texas for spring break.
Yes.
And saw my family. But while I was there, Bill and I and Bill's sister and her husband went on a ghost and murder tour in Austin. And our guide's name was Jamie. He had a British accent. Amazing storyteller. And he's the kind of person that can tell in about 30 seconds that they've been doing this for a long time. And he totally loves it. He's such a great storyteller. Good. So at some point during the tour, he started talking about his own experiences. So not just Austin history, but like his own paranormal origin story.
Nice. Did you give him a sticker?
I did.
Okay,
I
good.
did. So his name was Jamie. And he grew up in a house that for about 200 years before his family lived there was a restaurant. So it was a running restaurant for 200 years in England. And the layout of the house reflected that. So when you walked in, the main floor was the kitchen, and then you go downstairs, and that was where the bedrooms were. So from the time when he was a kid, there were always sounds coming from upstairs in the kitchen. So at night, there would be footsteps or clanking around, or it sounded like utensils moving around, cupboards opening and shutting in the kitchen. And it sounded like someone was in the middle of making food or whatever, and that was just part of their life, So they knew it was the kitchen ghost, and they didn't pay it a lot of mind, But so it was just kind of a feature of the house. Okay. So at some point he got a girlfriend, when he was a young adult, and he brought her home, and this was her first time visiting the house. And in the middle of the night, she woke him up, and she's like, "Jamie, what is your mom doing upstairs in the kitchen all night? She's making all this noise." And he's like, "Oh." That's not my mom. That's the kitchen ghost. Can you imagine, like, it's your first night,
Right.
like, meeting the family, sleeping over, whatever. And he, that's how she found out. So
Oh my God.
he told this story with zero drama. Like, it was just completely reasonable, it's just the kitchen ghost, whatever. So can you imagine, like, what that might have felt like for
Oh my
her?
gosh. She's like, well, first of all, I'm picturing her, she wakes up and she's like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Like, this is so annoying.
Yeah.
And, then,
Yeah.
and he's like, there's
kitchen
something I've been meaning
Yeah.
to tell you.
Might have, like, ruined the vibe a little
Right.
bit. Jamie had paranormal experiences going back to when he was really young. And the ones that stuck with him the most were the ones that reminded him of his grandma or like that were related to his grandmother. So he had a Thomas the Tank Engine clock, and that was like his prize thing, his prized possession. He loved Thomas. And at some point it quit working, and they took the batteries out. And so it was just like a decoration. Well, his grandmother passed away, and the next day the clock started working again, and it was right on time, and the batteries weren't in it at all.
Oh no, I have a chill.
The day after his grandmother passed.
Oh my gosh.
So shortly after this, his mom took him for a little trip into London, just sort of like a little distraction. They were sad about, losing her mom, his grandma. And so they went on a little tour of London, and they went to the Tower of London. And he was, being a little kid, they were in like a little souvenir shop, and he got this tiny little cannon, and he was so excited about it. He begged for it, and Mom got it for him. And so later that day, they were walking, and they went by the Thames River, and he dropped it in.
Oh.
And so he was devastated. Watched it drop, watched it sink, and he cried and cried. And he begged his mom to go back and get another one, and she said no. And so this was terrible, horrible, but get a load of this. So they go back home, and that little cannon was sitting on his bed. And his mom had no explanation for it. The way that he told it was one of those things that just like stayed with him his whole life.
Stop it.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh
He's
my
like,
gosh.
he's like, my mom swears that she did not go back and get another one.
Whoa.
And it was right there on his bed.
That's a lot. Like, that's a lot of manipulation.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. How?
I don't
crazy?
know. That's weird.
But I wonder if this is what made him get so interested in this whole
It's his origin
realm.
story.
It is. And he's so he was just such a great tour guide. He just an amazing storyteller, So anyway, that's Jamie. If you're ever in Austin, you should go on his tour, the Ghosts and Murders tour.
Wow.
You won't regret it. And Jamie, if you're listening, here's your shout out. I told him I asked him permission to share this on the story, and I told him that I would. So I'll let him know that it's coming up, and so he can listen. And thank you so much for sharing your story, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Whoa. And thanks so much to all of you for listening to this episode of the You Two Scare Me podcast.
Listeners, you can help support us by telling your friends and family all about our podcast. Please share the You Two Scare Me podcast with everyone you know.
And you know what else we need are some reviews. So why don't you rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. It really is so helpful when people rate and review us.
Yes, come check out our website for You Two Scare Me merch. We have things like stickers, mugs, shirts. We also have episode notes, photos, and more. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Find us on Instagram at you2scareme_podcast, on Facebook at you2scareme, and you can follow us on TikTok at you2scareme podcast. No spaces.
Remember to send us your own stories of hauntings, mimics, cannons in the river, cryptids, aliens, or anything weird for our Somebody Told Me segment at you2scaremepodcast@gmail.com. That's YOUTWO scare me podcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for wandering through the shadows with us.
Until next time, stay curious and beware what lurks beyond the light.